So you're running SFTP Gateway for secure file transfers, but can you answer these questions? Who logged in at 3 a.m.? Which user uploaded that massive file? And how many failed login attempts happened last week? In this video, I'll show you how to deploy a complete log observability stack using Grafana, Loki, and Alloy, all within a single Docker Compose command. By the end, you'll have real-time dashboards showing every file transfer, login attempt, and user session. Here's what we'll cover: the log observability stack architecture, a one-command Docker deployment, pre-built security dashboards, and custom LogQL queries. Before we dive in, let's understand what we're building. Here's the data flow. SFTP Gateway writes audit logs for every action: logins, uploads, downloads, disconnects. Alloy picks up these logs, parses out useful fields like username, IP address, and bytes transferred. Loki stores and indexes everything, and Grafana lets us visualize and query it all. So the SFTP Gateway audit logs actually contain a lot of useful information, but it's pretty difficult to tell what's going on because you're combing through text files. What Grafana does is it creates visualizations of your audit log activity, so it's easier for you to see patterns and extract actual meaning out of your audit logs. So what we're doing here is log-based observability, which is a little different from what you might be used to, like CloudWatch metrics such as CPU utilization and disk I/O. Before we start, here's what we'll need. In this tutorial, I'm doing everything on my MacBook, so I have Docker Desktop installed. If you wanted to install this on an EC2 instance or Azure VM, you could also do that, but that's a different tutorial. Besides having Docker Desktop, you're also going to need some RAM and some free disk space. Next, let's create our project structure. In a new folder, create subfolders for Alloy, Grafana, and Loki. And then within the Grafana folder, create some more subfolders. Here I have a provisioning subfolder. And then under provisioning, I have dashboards and data sources. And then within dashboards, I have another subfolder, JSON. Then you're going to create a bunch of config files. For example, here I have config.alloy under Alloy. I have lokiconfig.yaml under Loki. And then for Grafana, under dashboards, I have a dashboards.yaml file, a data sources.yaml under data sources, and then an SFTP overview.json under JSON. And then the most important file here is the docker compose.yaml. Once you have this folder structure all set up, you're going to have to go to our documentation to get the contents of each of these files. So if you go to help.thorntech.com, under the containerization section, there's a KB article called Docker Log Observability. I'll also put the link in the description below. If you scroll down, you should see the contents for the docker compose.yaml file, the lokiconfig.yaml file, the config.alloy YAML file, and pretty much every other config file in this tutorial. Now, most of these config files are just gluing things together. Loki is going to point to Alloy, and Grafana is going to point to Loki. And Grafana also has a dashboard config file here. But the most interesting file is going to be the docker compose.yaml. So the Docker file is going to deploy the containerized version of SFTP Gateway. And that includes the Java backend, which also serves the SFTP service, the Postgres database, and also the Nginx web UI. And in the Docker file, these will show up as 3 different containers. Also within the Docker file, we have an Alloy container, a Loki container, and a Grafana container. What Alloy does is it tails the audit logs from SFTP Gateway, and then Alloy tags the logs and stores it within a Loki data store. And then Grafana is a website that shows you graphs and visualizations based off of this Loki data store. So here I have a terminal window, and you can see my Docker Compose file, as well as my subfolders for Alloy, Grafana, and Loki. And I'm going to deploy this whole Docker setup in a single command. And if all goes well, you should be able to see all of your Docker containers running on your machine. So here I have the SFTP Gateway backend, the SFTP Gateway frontend, and also the Postgres database. In addition, I have Alloy, Loki, and Grafana running as separate containers as well. But before we can see anything in Grafana, first I need to configure SFTP Gateway with a test user. This is just the first launch experience where I create my initial web admin user. Next, I log in as that web admin user. Since I'm running this on my local laptop instead of EC2, I'm going to have to configure my cloud connection so that it can connect to an S3 bucket. Remember to set your region. And then instead of using an instance profile, you'll need to set an access key and secret for an IAM user that has S3 permissions. Next, click Test Connection. And then make sure you see 3 green check marks before proceeding. Now that I'm connected to S3, next I'm going to create a test user. Okay, SFTP Gateway should be configured at this point. So next, I'm going to upload some test data. Here, I'm connected to localhost on port 22. And here I have the correct username. But just for test purposes, I'm going to enter in an incorrect password. And I'm going to log in with this bad password a couple times, just so we could see it in the logs later on. Next, I'm going to log in with the correct password this time. And here I have some test files ready to go. Now that I've generated some log activity, it's finally time to take a look at it in Grafana. Since this is Docker, I'm accessing Grafana via port 3000. But if this was deployed on an actual server, you would want to proxy Grafana through Nginx. For the credentials, I have it set to admin. And here I'll change the password to something different. In our configuration, one of the files that you created was a Grafana dashboard. So if you go to Dashboards, SFTP Gateway, you should see an SFTP Gateway overview dashboard. In here, you could see things like authentication successes versus failures, a breakdown of different SFTP actions, the amount of data that users are uploading. And this one here might be particularly useful if you have port 22 open to the world. You could see if scripted attacks are coming from a specific IP. If you scroll down, this dashboard also has actual log information, authentication failures, and session activity. At the top of the dashboard, you can filter your results. So for username, I can filter on my test user, and then I can focus on uploaded files. And I can even search for a specific file. And here we see the log results are filtered on those 3 items. Now everything you see here is completely customizable. So you could set up your dashboard differently depending on whether you're focused on security, performance, or data delivery. Besides dashboards, you might want to spend some time under Explore. Here you could write custom queries to do some exploratory troubleshooting. If you're used to log query language, you could set this to code, or you could change this to builder and use this wizard to construct your queries. Here, I'll show you a couple of examples. The first query is a file search, similar to the filter we did on the dashboard. Here I'm just searching for bigfile.txt, and it's going to show me all of the log entries with that file name. For this next query, I'm looking for file upload complete events for my test user. For this query, I'm counting the number of failed login attempts, and here it shows the 3 failed login attempts from before. If I go back to FileZilla, I could try typing a bad password, and then the graph will show this in real time. And for this last query I'm showing you, it's looking for upload or download events for any file that's bigger than 100 megabytes. And this could be useful if you suspect that a user is bogging down your service by uploading a lot of large files. And that's it. You now have complete visibility into your SFTP gateway. You can see every login, every file transfer, and catch suspicious activity before it becomes a problem. The full KB article with all configuration files is linked in the description. If you found this helpful, subscribe for more DevOps and infrastructure content. Drop a comment if you have questions, or if you want to see custom dashboard tutorials.